Hey everyone, so I wanted to start a new series on my channel where I highlight fragrances that come from really passionate creators that want to tell a story with their fragrances. And of course, these fragrances are going to be ones that I think smell really good. So I've been recently overwhelmed at the amount of fragrances that have been coming out, especially from newer houses, that I think are more focused on making money than on making fragrances that are unique and memorable and exciting. I don't think there's anything wrong with wearing something that just smells good. I have a lot of those fragrances that I just put on days where I don't want anything that has a deeper meaning and that I just want to smell nice. But I think with the amount of brands that are out nowadays, a lot of the perfumers and creators that are really passionate about this art form are getting buried under those brands. So I wanted to highlight those fragrances and kind of give them recognition for the work that they do. The fragrances that I'll be selecting for each of the videos I'll be putting out in this series have to follow these 4 criteria. So one is the fragrance has to come from a creator that is passionate about this art form. Second, it has to be a fragrance that I would wear on myself. It wouldn't make sense for me to put out a positive review if it's a fragrance that I just wouldn't wear or that I think it doesn't smell good. There are lots of great artistic fragrances that tell a fantastic story, but I prefer to kind of admire those from afar. So all the reviews that I'll be putting out in this series are going to be fragrances that I actually do wear. Third, they're going to be unique and original type of fragrances. I'm not going to be featuring fragrances that purposely clone or accidentally dupe fragrances or that just simply follow trends without kind of doing something unique to those trends. Lastly, I think this is a really important point. The fragrance has to tell a story that the perfumer or the creator experienced firsthand. And the reason for that is because there are a lot of brands that already exist that borrow ideas from different groups or from the past. And borrowing itself is not a bad thing. I don't see that as inherently negative. And I could think of lots of examples, especially music, where, old pieces of art are kind of borrowed and then they're kind of executed into really great ideas. And I don't see anything wrong with that in most circumstances. But what I want to focus on are stories that people have experienced firsthand. And the reason for that is because I've found with a lot of art, whether it's film, whether it's music, fragrances, the execution of the ideas are a lot more compelling when they come from artists that know what that story is like, that they're trying to tell. I think about the movie Moonlight. It's told by a Black director and a Black screenwriter or playwright, and they know what that experience is like that they had portrayed in the movie. And I think that movie would not have been as good as it was if it was told by someone else that doesn't know what that experience is like. And I think about directors too, like Scorsese and Coppola, and they have movies that talk about the Italian American experience. And I think if someone else were to try to tell those stories, it just wouldn't be executed as well. And I think that same logic kind of goes with fragrances. Yes, there are some fragrances that are beautiful and maybe are executed quite well from people who don't know what that story is like, but a lot of times I find those stories, those fragrances, to be kind of lackluster compared to the examples I could think of that tell that personal story really well. Now let's talk about the fragrance that will kick off this series. I'm really excited to talk about it because I do love it. This is Buen Camino from Chronotope. Chronotope is a small brand that was created by Carter Weeks Maddox. He is a self-trained perfumer. He makes all of the fragrances that are in this house, and it's a fairly new house. I believe this one was released last year. I might have to fact check that, but this is a fairly new fragrance. I'll first talk about what this fragrance smelled like to me before I had read the copy. Whenever I sample fragrances, especially new ones, I try to avoid reading the story behind it because I don't want that to kind of influence my experience wearing the fragrance. So when I first tried this fragrance, I remember the 2 main things that I got from it were lavender, a lot of lavender actually, and quite a bit of star anise. This is very spicy on my skin. And there was something also in the beginning of the development that kind of gave this hint of dustiness, kind of reminding me of finding an old book and then brushing off the dust that had accumulated on it for years. The dustiness doesn't last very long though, but the lavender and the star anise are very persistent in this fragrance. I would say those are the two things that last from when I first spray it and then hours and hours later. The overall feel that I get from it is comfort, especially when it dries down. And the reason why I feel comforted by this fragrance is because it brings back a lot of memories for me. The star anise definitely makes me think of the times that I go into Asian supermarkets, especially ones that sell hot food, where you see roasted duck, roasted pork, and a lot of times they use star anise to flavor those meats. And I think that's why I thought about that experience when I spray this. The lavender is also something that has personal meaning to me. Lavender is a smell that I associate a lot with my mother. When I was growing up, she wore a lot of lavender hand cream. There's some body washes she owned that were scented with lavender. And she herself, I think, would say lavender is one of her favorite smells. So maybe that's why I felt this sense of comfort when I smelled this fragrance. But even though those are the two main things that I get from it, there are lots of other things going on here. Sometimes I get hints of this slightly sweaty accord that weaves in and out of the fragrance. But it's not something that would be off-putting to me. It kind of smells like that is what my skin naturally smells like, along with the complex smells that I get from this. And then maybe an hour after spraying it, I get this gourmand type of accord in it as well. There's something that kind of smells like a baked dessert that my mother would make. I can't tell you what exactly that dessert would be, but it smells like something kind of coming out of the oven, fresh and ready to eat. The fascinating thing that I find about this fragrance is that I think it's a fragrance that brings comfort to a lot of different people. I already mentioned why it's comforting to me, but whenever I have someone else smell it, whether I kind of decanted it for someone else or my husband smells it, they always say they felt that this was soothing and comforting in a way. A friend of mine that I gave a sample to said that it reminded her of broth. My husband, growing up, he's had a lot of Vietnamese friends and they would eat pho all the time. He said it smells like pho, and those memories are kind of comforting to him. And other reviewers I've seen that have this fragrance or who have sampled it kind of say similar things about how soothing this fragrance is. So when I read the copy for this fragrance, at first I was like, I'm not sure if I get all of the things that Carter was trying to outline in this story. But then as I spent more time with the fragrance, and it could be the power of suggestion, I did kind of pick out what he was trying to tell. Buen Camino is a very personal story. It's based on a very specific experience that Carter had hiking the El Camino de Santiago de Compostela. I'm aware of that site because it's a huge pilgrimage site for a lot of Catholics. I grew up Catholic. It's a hike I would never take because it's like 500 miles long, I think. But I know my in-laws have taken that hike, so I'm familiar with the importance of it. It's called St. James Way, and apparently tradition has it that St. James, who's one of the apostles, has his remains buried somewhere there. So it's a very, very significant place for a lot of religious Christians. So Carter had hiked this route, and before he hit the halfway point, he had broken both his feet. He was hungry and tired from the hike. He had lost so much weight, and his health condition was so poor from this long walk. So the fragrance kind of captures some of the sweat that he had from that hike. And I think the dustiness that I was referencing earlier is something that he wanted to capture too from the route. But a lot of the smells that are in this fragrance, I think, comes from what had happened after he was taken in, I think, by some nuns. They were taking care of him. They were giving him medication, and had also given him some lavender to smell to kind of relax himself. And there is a part in the story where he gets this regional dessert. So I think this story is very, very specific. And as I was kind of reading through the copy and smelling this, I get bits and pieces of that story. Buen Camino is such a unique fragrance. I have not smelled anything like this. And I think the story that Carter wanted to tell is just beautifully done here. It's the type of fragrance I reach for when I know I'm in a bad mood, when I'm stressed out, or I'm just feeling really down. It's one of those fragrances that is so memorable that when I'm not wearing it, I know in my head what it smells like. It leaves a lasting impression. And I think that's what makes this really special. And also the fact that whenever different people try this out, they always kind of mention how comforting this is. And even though they might not smell exactly what Carter was trying to tell with those specific details from that story, I think it succeeded in giving that sense of comfort that he felt at the end of that journey. Something I forgot to mention is how cool the bottles are from Chronotope. As you can see here, this has a little personal touch from Carter. It has the painted thumbprint. I do have the travel size of this fragrance. You're gonna see the bottles on the website. They're all bigger if you get a default size, but they all have the colored thumbprint, and each fragrance has a different color for the thumbprint. The bottle itself is, fairly plain. It's not that unique, but I do like this personal touch. Now, I don't want to focus too much on performance. I think for this series, what's more important is the story that these fragrances are trying to tell and how they smell like. But in case you are interested, the performance of this is something I don't have any complaints about. It lasts hours and hours on me. When I smell it or when I spray it at night, I could definitely smell it strongly in the morning. So I would say it lasts at least 8 hours on me, sometimes longer. It isn't a huge projector on me. It's not the type of fragrance that will walk ahead of you, like way ahead of you. It kind of walks with me, but it's definitely present. So I don't have any complaints about how it performs. I would recommend, if you want to wear a beautiful fragrance that is unique, you love the smell of lavender and you don't mind a lot of spices, this is such a fantastic fragrance to try out. You're not going to smell anything like this, in my opinion. So those are my thoughts on Buen Camino. Let me know your thoughts on this brand if you've tried it, or if you haven't, tell me what you think about this series. I won't be releasing consecutive videos that go under this series. I'll be putting out different types of content here and there, but I do want to give individual videos to fragrances that I feel really passionate about. So I'll see you next time. Bye.